Okay, so as I said, when you're in real estate, you're working with people. And our business is that of relationships. And so it's easy to, when you're taking the contract classes, when you're taking how to lead generate, when you're taking a lot of that kind of stuff, to get caught up in all of the mechanics of it. But it's still people that you're dealing with. And everything that goes on with people is going to affect your business, including you. And I'll get to that in a little bit. But you can look at people's different personality types, and that's why it's really good to know the DISC personality. There's a number of easy, free ones you can use to get the DISC personality test. And those go in the 4 DISC. And usually everybody, and it depends on how deep you want to get into it. Usually everybody is, one of the 4 quadrants is their dominant, and then they have a secondary. And then there's also the idea you can train yourself. So just real briefly on that, DISC, D is like they're the high achievers, the A-type personalities, blah, blah, blah. I tends to be that interactive sort of person. S tends to be a little bit more emotional, and the C is really like analytical. So, and I'm really butchering it, but just bear with me. When I first started off in this industry, I was much more, I would say, of an S and then secondary I, and then slowly, quickly, I became primary I, but I had to train myself to be a lot of D. So my natural inclination is a high I and secondary S, and Joey is very much like that as well. But I've had to train myself in a lot of situations to respond like a D. Otherwise, if I just do everything out of my I and S, I'm like always waiting to feel if it feels good and what does everybody else think, instead of jumping on it when I need to, and being able to make a decision quickly. At the same time, when I'm talking to other people, I need to keep in mind, well, what are they like? You know, are they a high D or a high I, or, you know, a high C, where they need to be analytical? So, and I've dealt with clients where I had, in the span of 1 year, my first 2 deals, I had somebody who was a very high D. And when I would call her on the phone, I would say, hey, we went ahead and we did your open houses. I had about 21 people come through. I had 12 people that were interested. 3 said they were coming back tomorrow. I'm going to do the same hours tomorrow. Great, Rob, thanks. Click, we're done. Okay, we're not on the phone more than 2 to 3 minutes and we're done. The second client is very high S. And I would call them up and I would say, hey, did open house today. Well, did people like the place? Did they feel it was well lit enough? Did they like the way things were arranged? What did they think about the entry area? And everything for him was, how did they feel about it? What was their experience? And so I have to talk to him from anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes about the open house. Essentially, it's the same conversation, but I had to gauge it differently for the person who I'm speaking with. You're going to have to do the same thing when you're working with people. So a lot of times, you know, it's very easy for us to be like, oh my God, why don't they just understand the way I understand it? And at times when you're driving behind somebody really slow on the freeway, I totally agree with that. And that's the way it is. But there's other times too, when you're dealing with other people, come from their perspective. What is their personality like? How do they like to communicate? You know, it's even in communication styles. I'm a person, like, if I text, give me all the information, and most people in my age bracket are the same way. My husband's the same way. Give me most of the information in one text, maybe a follow-up, and that's it. But the people that do the basically the machine gun texting, it'd be like, you know, what are, click, you doing, click, tonight, question mark, question mark, question mark. And all those are different texts. It was like, oh my God, you're driving me crazy. You're blowing up my phone. But if that's how they communicate, then I adjust my communication style to their communication style. Or I may just call it out. And I may say, hey, by the way, I want to let you know, Tony, I'm just calling out a name. When you text me, and I've actually had to do this for a client because they talk like that. And they said, well, why didn't you get back to me? And I said, well, this is normally how you text me. And you really rarely end the text without doing at least 2 question marks. So I was waiting for those question marks because you kind of do it in a bunch of bullet fashions that come out me all at once. Oh, and I said, yeah, I'm waiting for the full sentence. And so I was waiting for the full sentence to complete. Normally, if you notice in my text, I'll send you everything in one text at once, and I may space the different areas. Oh, okay. And then from that point, everything was understood because we just communicated about it. But that's why I wanted to bring that, hey, you're working with other people. And all those different things, take into account. Sometimes we talk about families and you talk about like, oh, well, you just, that's the way Aunt Gladys is. Okay. Maybe, whatever, all the different little idiosyncrasies that can happen with that. Your clients are going to be the same way. And I wanted to dive that into a little, because even when you're lead generating, even when you're getting together with people, all of that is going to be taken into account. Alyssa, you alluded earlier that you had a number of face-to-face contacts, which are great. And I love that. Sometimes you're going to have people that when they get together face-to-face, they're thinking 2 hours. They're thinking like, let's sit down and chat. And you're going, literally, we only met at Starbucks. I mean, we don't need to be here for 2 hours, but that's who they are. So you take that into account. Even if you don't want to spend that 2 hours, you then gracefully figure out a way to communicate. Hey, that'd be great. By the way, I want to let you know, I know we're getting together at noon. I'm going to have to be done by 1, but I definitely am looking forward to getting together with you. So that way he kind of puts a cap on it. You're taking into account, you're dealing with another human being, and this is how they are. At the same time, you may have somebody else that they're a 20-minute person. And so you realize when you're at Starbucks, and if you want to talk about a few things, you're not going to take 20 minutes, talking about, oh, the funny things you just saw on TV on Netflix the night before, because then that's your entire conversation. And now they're getting antsy. And so you want to gauge everything according to who they are. Does that make sense on any of this? Okay. In some of these, I want to get into also some of the other parts where people are not perfect. As you can read, they can also have bad days, just like we all can. So sometimes people, you're talking with them and it may not seem who they normally are. You would like to have grace. So give people grace. There's times everybody just has a bad day, or something just went wrong and you don't know what that is. So understand when you're, working with people, that could be what's going on. Sometimes people have insecurities. I know I lost a listing a couple of years ago because basically the client had insecurity about me being a man. And it was just one of those things I couldn't overcome that. It's like, okay, well, I am, so that's the way it is. But he was insecure about it. So it had nothing to do with my skills. It had nothing to do with my experience. It's just, that was his issue. And that's the way it can be. Some people can have, physical conditions, things that affect them. It could be anything from hearing or anything like that. People can also have triggers. So there could be things, everything could be okay. And then all of a sudden they react to something. And you're like, why did they react to that? And it's easy for us to take that personally, but it's not about us. It's about how they're reacting to something. So just keep that in mind. And not that you have to be their therapist, although some clients, you will end up being their therapist. But there's going to be times that things will trigger them. There will be times that things will bring out something that all of a sudden they related to something completely unrelatable to, but they did, and they connected it to that. And so you want to make sure of that. And then we're not all knowing, and neither are your clients. So because of that, there's going to be times something comes up and it just blindsides them. All of a sudden they react a certain way, or they will not respond in the way you thought, they would respond in or should respond in. And they can just be totally blindsided in that. And by the same token, you're got all these same traits. And you don't know what's going to trigger them. We're all in process and we're all in growth. And we all have different desires for that too. I'll just put it out there. In my family, there's some family members that they're not really that committed to growing. So they will have these insecurities and these triggers, and literally somebody could cut them off and now they're having a bad day for the entire day, sort of thing. And they don't want to grow beyond that. And if that's your client, that's the way it is. But if it's you, you have a choice to grow, and you have a choice in what you want to do. And again, we're all in process, and how I handled things years ago would probably be different how I handle it now than how I handle it 10 years from now, because I want to continue to grow. So I don't want to be that same person all the time. And you're going to have some days that are going to be a bad day. You're going to have some insecurities or some triggers or some things like that. For instance, years ago, I did some work on the house, and my husband came out and looked at it, and he kind of made just this cute little joke. And immediately I got so upset at him, and we ended up in a big fight. And it got to the point where literally we saw our couples counselor. And when we did, it all came down to the fact that when I was a kid, I was teased by my older sister. And when he did that, for some reason, I connected it. And I still kind of don't know how I made that direct connection, because, a lot of people tease you, but in that instance, I made that connection, and it brought back all of those feelings, and that's a trigger. So that was something like, oh, I had to learn and I had to deal through. Had that been a transaction going on, it could easily have been the same thing, and I would have that same reaction. And that's the thing to be aware of and to rise above that, to know like, hey, is this the way I should be reacting in a situation? In our industry, the great thing is that you guys are real estate agents. The other side of that is they don't really filter out who can become a real estate agent. So you do have people in this industry that have got all of these, things going on in their lives, and they don't really care if they get any better. And I've had other agents be adversarial just because they want to be adversarial, and are known for that too. It wasn't just me. I talked to other people in the industry and found out, oh no, that is the way they are. And then you have to deal with that. And then you have to mitigate that. When it comes to another agent, your goal is, when you enter a transaction, well, our goal is that we close together. We're on the same team. Unfortunately, a lot of people in our industry see another agent as an adversary. And that's honestly, that's one of their insecurities. They can't see the fact that, no, we're actually on the same team trying to close this together. Yes, there's going to be negotiations. Yes, we're going to have to actually deal with some things in the transaction, but our goal is that we close the transaction together. So I wanted to highlight this today because it's something that is really important to me, because real estate is an industry that all the different things, the self-discipline, of having to set a schedule and stick to your schedule, setting goals, being accountable, all of those things are personal growth things. And the more that you grow personally, the better your business is going to be. And on that note, the more you interact with people, the more these things are going to happen. And the more you're going to be able to handle it and understand it. I had a transaction a year and a half ago that I was dealing with another agent, and she said, I don't understand why your clients, they just don't. And I, by the way, I prefaced where the clients were, but I understand why your clients, they just won't make the decision on this right now. And I said, no, they're going to go ahead and they need to feel. And I said, they're very emotionally based. And I said, I understand this is a business transaction, but this is not how they think. And because this is not how they think, that they're not going to respond the way you think they should respond. And literally the other agent said, well, that just doesn't make sense to me, but I guess you get it. So we'll just go your route. I was like, okay. And because that's actually, what was happening. So I want you guys to understand that. Any questions on this? Okay. I know this isn't the nuts and bolts part. I know we've gone over sometimes nuts and bolts, like, hey, here's request for repairs, here how this is done, blah, blah, blah. But this is the people part that is part of your business. And how you interact with people is how your business comes about and how you get repeat business. If people had a great transaction with you, a great feeling, they'll use you again. I had a client who called me yesterday. We talked for a while on the phone because he had a minor surgery done, and he wanted to reach out and just say hi and blah, 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 and fine. I helped him with 3 of his transactions. And he had, the first experience was a great experience and been in touch. And then I helped him with subsequent transactions because we kept that ongoing relationship. Now, he's one of those people that I love him to death, but his pursuit of personal growth, not necessarily on a priority. So some of the same insecurities and triggers and all those different things that make us human that I met him at day 1 when I first started my career is still the same person he is today. So even when we dealt with all the transactions, I had to take into account all these different things. I had to realize that sometimes when I was dealing with him, he was having a bad day, or there was even a point in time where he got really heated about a certain situation, but I could tell it was triggering an insecurity he had. And so I didn't want to call it out because then it'd make it worse, obviously. So I mitigated that, and I just worked around it too. Those are some of the things that, because you're dealing with people, it's going to come up. We're people. This is what happens. And following up to that at the end, I do want to say that people, again, they think like, oh, the transaction's done. Boom, boom, we're out of here. Or, and it's easy to think that. It's so easy for me to think sometimes when I'm done, hey, we are done, blah, blah, blah. But I want to keep in touch with them. I want to make sure that like I send them a thank you card, or more of a follow-up gift, which is I do. I try and make it personal. I try and drop off the thank you gift. I know some agents that like, they have these custom candles and they have them delivered. And yes, that's lovely. But I'm like, okay, except that's still a little bit impersonal. And so I will kind of try and do something a little bit beyond that and dig deeper. And sometimes it's tough. Sometimes you don't know your clients, but that follow-up and that appreciation, your clients will appreciate, just like we all do. When you, when you show appreciation, you're thanking them, obviously, because we're not entitled to our business. It's the sort of thing that people give us the opportunity that we get to work with them. And when you have that kind of approach, then of course you're grateful for it, and you let them know and you appreciate it. And the more you can personalize that, the better. Again, sometimes, it's a little bit tough knowing what to do on that. I closed a home in March, and I kind of knew my clients, but I didn't know them well enough to really personalize anything. So I got them this great portable barbecue and things that went along with it. And they thought that was great because I found out they were campers. So I kind of struck gold there, but it was still enough where I was like, okay, I got close enough, but it wasn't like some of my clients were literally, I've had somebody, I sold their home and their father's custom stained glass was in that home that got sold. And so I had photographs taken of it, then printed out large and then professionally framed, and then gave it to them as a thank you gift. So that way they got to keep at least a copy of their father's stained glass. That's super personal, so, but that's because I knew their story and I knew all that in between. But that same client, by the way, I call up all the time and we're always in touch with each other. And it's that relationship and that rapport that they've told me, Rob, you're the first one we're going to refer to. You're the one that, if we do sell because they have a home on Harvard in LA, if we do sell that home, you're going to be the one that sells it. That kind of relationship keeps that going. And like I said, they're not perfect. Neither am I. By the way, that's the same client that's a high D. So I make sure all my conversations with them are short and sweet. But that's a thing that we're interacting with people. And that's what real estate, you know, that's who you're dealing with. Any questions on this?
No, so far so good.
Okay. Customize things to what you think your client will like and prefer. You know, I talk about that too. Even when it comes to communication, are they texting people? Are they phone call people? Are they email people? Do they care? You know, and even in that, how do they prefer it to be done? Are there times they prefer, and that sort of thing. Find that information out. And even when you ask those questions, remember you're indirectly asking them, hey, I care about you because I care about your communication style. That's what you're telling them indirectly, and people take notice of that. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover for today.